All right, good morning. Let's have a look at creating section drawings and also, in terms of AutoCAD commands, look at the hatch command. Okay, um, so this is assignment in Module 3, drawing 3.5M cutoff holder section view. Okay, you should have already created this drawing in an earlier assignment in Module 3, but without the section view, and that was drawing 3.4M. So I'm going to pick up from there, okay, and talk about the, creating the section view parts of that, and also the hatch, okay. So this is the assignment. We're going to plot the drawing on an A3 border, or prepare it for plotting with PDF. And let's look at the drawing. So here's the drawing that we're doing. And like I said, you've already created this drawing in a previous assignment. So we only need to modify it to make it a section view. All right, so that's not going to take too much time. So I will talk about the hatch command and kind of run through some of the operations with that command. Please be aware that there is also a link to a CAD Learning video for hatching, which is going to go much more in detail. So you have two options, or multiple options I should say, for exploring the hatch command. I will also talk about creating the cutting plane line, which is not as easy or straightforward as you might think. AutoCAD doesn't make it easy for us to do this, funny enough. It's kind of a construction process, not really a command, so to speak. So we'll talk a little bit about that too, or we'll have to talk about that. And that is not in CAD Learning. All right, so enough of this. Let's get on to the drawing. Okay, so here's my previously created drawing of the cutoff holder. Okay, so it's all good. I don't need to fix anything there. The views are spaced appropriately. You will have dimensions on this. I do not have dimensions on this. You might want to freeze your dimension layer. By the way, let's talk a little bit about this before. You're not going to see your dimensions, or excuse me, you are going to see your dimensions in this view, okay? And they might get in the way. So you might want to freeze your dimensions. Now let me show you how to do that. And in order to do that, I'm going to put some dimensions on here. So let me go to the dimension layer, and I'm going to do it properly, which means I'm going to go to my A3 border. I'm going to double click inside here. I'm going to do a zoom extend, Z space, E space, and then I'm going to go down here and set the scale. And gosh darn it, if the scale shouldn't be just around 1 to 1, right? Now that's a little tight, but if I keep the dimensions inside between views, I think that's perfectly doable. And if I need to, I can squeeze these in a little bit. So I'm going to set that at 1 to 1. I'm going to lock my viewport, and I'm going to come down here to model, and I'm going to just throw on some dimensions. Remember, this is just simply to show you that. And I have my. I failed to do this. Let's go to make sure this is set also at 1 to 1. That's critical for annotative dimensioning, what we're doing right now. Okay, so let me just make sure we're clear about that. The process, the workflow is I go to my floating model space. I set the viewport scale to 1 to 1. I lock it, or whatever my viewport scale is, 1 to 2, 2 to 1, whatever it needs to be, lock it. And then you go back to model, and then you set this scale to be the same thing. Now, I'm sure that this was discussed in earlier videos, but it bears repeating because it's very important. This is not your viewport scale. This is what's called Annotation Scale, and it affects the size of the annotation objects in model space. You'll notice that if I change this to 2 to 1, the view doesn't change, right? If I change it to 100 to 1, nothing changes, right? 1 to 1, nothing changes, because this is not affecting the view scale. This is affecting the annotation scale. That is the size of my annotation objects, i.e. text, dimensions, anything else really. It's text dimensions, but any other annotation, okay? Annotation objects. All right, so I want to set this to the same value, 1 to 1. All right, there's nothing to lock here. You just set it 1 to 1, and now I can dimension. Okay, so remember, I'm just putting some dimensions on here just to show you how to, freeze the layer and stuff. So okay, so here's my dimension. Let me just put on a couple more because I don't want to go too far into this. All right, so and there we go. All right, so all right, so I got my dimensions on here, and let's pretend like everything is dimensioned like it would be because you previously created this drawing. So now you're ready to change this, adjust this, modify this for the section view, and you might feel like the dimensions get in the way. All right, you might feel that way. Honestly, they probably aren't going to get in the way, but there might be some instances where it is a little bit tight. So how do you take care of this? Well, you freeze your dimension layer. So you go up to the dimension layer. By the way, we should be on the visible layer for the drawing. And then I'm going to go up here to dimension, and I'm going to hit the little sun, and I'm going to change it into a snowflake. Okay? And so there we go. Now notice the dimensions go away. Now, if you go do this, all right, now watch. I'm going to undo this, all right, and I'm going to leave my dimension layer to be the current layer, right? And you come in here, so dimension is my current layer, and you're going to come up here and you're going to go, yeah, I want to do like Chuck says, and I want to freeze these dimensions. So I go over here to freeze the dimensions, and you get this warning, layer cannot freeze. Ah, what's going on? You can't freeze a current layer. Okay, so that's all this is saying. This is saying, hey, you can't freeze a current layer. Change the current layer. So you close this, and you go like I just did to visible, and you make that the current layer, and then you go back again to dimension, and now you freeze it. Okay, so and I'm going to get rid of the command line because it just gets in the way, and I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so there we go. Now, there is a slight warning I should caution that I should put on with freezing your dimensions, because let's say I freeze the dimensions like this, and then for some reason or another I feel like this view should be moved a little bit closer, and so I window this view and I move it a little bit like this, and everything is good, and then I unfreeze my dimension layer. Guess what? I've messed up my dimensions, right? Because I move the view, now it's not going to have the dimensions attached properly. All right. So don't move the views with your dimensions frozen or off because they're going to mess everything up. All right. So let's go back here. I don't want to do that. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So back to where we should be. I have my dimensions frozen. My dimension layer is frozen, and I'm ready to modify this to create the section view. Okay, so let's take a second to look at section views. So I'm going to, or hatching, I should say. So I'm going to pull this over to the side, and I'm just going to draw a couple things. I'll draw a rectangle here, and I'll draw a circle in here. Okay, and for our drawings, we want to put our hatch lines on the section layer. Okay, section lines should be thin and continuous. So the section layer, if I show you the section layer right there, it is a continuous line type, right? It's not broken or dashed or anything like that. And it has a default line weight, which a default line weight is in fact 0.3 millimeters. It's not explicitly set to 0.3, but default is 0.3. Notice that there really is only 2 line weights that are standardized in engineering drawings, and that is thick or thin. Okay, thick line weight is 0.6 millimeters, thin line weight is 0.3 millimeters, and like I said, default is equal to 0.3, so it's really the same thing. All right, so section lines 0.3, so let's go up there, and I'm going to change my current layer to the section layer so that I'm drawing on that layer. So now let's look at the hatch command. Okay, so the hatch command is up here under the draw menu, right? And if I expand on this, you can see there's some other things in here. We're not actually going to play around with the gradient, and certainly boundary is more used for 3D drawing. I suppose you could use it for 2D stuff, but I use it for 3D drawing for creating regions. But that's another class, MDT 160. Gradient behaves the same way as hatch. It just creates a solid kind of fill as opposed to a fill with lines. Okay, so it's done the exact same way. So let's look at the hatch command. All right, notice the ribbon changes. Right, so we go into the hatch creation ribbon. Hatch is by default an associative object. That means all the lines in the hatch, all the section lines, are going to stick together. And we want that. It's going to behave as a single object, and we want that. Okay, so this is one of those cases where we want to leave associative on, as opposed to the array command. Remember when we did array, and there were pros and cons to leaving it on as associative or not associative, and we discussed those and looked at the different effects of turning associative on and off. Okay, here we want, generally speaking, we want associative on. Now, AutoCAD is asking me to pick an internal point. Okay, and I'm not clicking on anything. I'll tell you when I click on the mouse, but as I move across here, see it's dynamically updating that, right? And as I move across here, so notice that it's finding internal points, and that's really what it's looking for. It's looking for me to pick a point inside a bounded object. Either, this rectangular shape or a circle or an ellipse or whatever. Any closed shape. Okay. Now, the hatch pattern, we can see it right here. This is called the angle pattern, and I can see it right there. It's the one that's highlighted. It's barely highlighted. You can see it's a different shade of gray. It's kind of a darker gray, but that's the angle one. So this is where we choose our pattern, what we see here. All right. Solid, ANSI 31, this is American National Standards Institute pattern number 31. ANSI 32, you can see it's slightly different. If I click on this, there we go. If I click on this one, there we go. If I click on solid, there we go. All right. Now I can expand this, right here on this button. I can expand that to show, look at all these hatch patterns we have. Right, and we're getting into some gradients here. All right, so there's some architectural patterns, there's more engineering patterns. So if I wanted a brick pattern right there, I could click on that. And there we go. I can also cycle up and down one row at a time by using these buttons. All right, so maybe if I want an earth pattern like that, that's kind of neat. Actually, what we're going to be doing is ANSI 31. Right? That's what we're going to be using. That's the standard section line pattern for engineering drawings, regardless of the material. Okay. Now, properties, we're not going to mess too much with the properties on the left-hand side here, pattern, bilayer, and none. Those are set appropriately. All right. So we don't have to change anything there. But the transparency, the angle, and the hatch scale, right? Remember, if I hover over this, it kind of shows me what each one is. We can adjust. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave it on hatch 31, and I'm going to click in here to choose that pattern and the area that we're applying it. Okay. Now notice the ribbon doesn't exit, right? So we're still in hatch creation. We haven't finished everything. When we click on this, then we finish that. So now I can adjust the angle and scale. Now, angle, we can type in a number right here. So if I type in like a 30, right, and then click out of here, you gotta type it in and then click, right? Click in here or somewhere else, and you can see it change that. You can also adjust it with the slider bar. So, right, we can cause it to rotate. We actually want it at 0 degrees here. Notice 0 degrees is a 45-degree angle, right? So what do you think happens if I change this to 45? And let me click. Yeah, it goes 45 is vertical, right? So if I change this to 90, what do I get? Yeah, it goes in the other direction. Okay, so again, 0 is fine for this. This is the only hatch pattern in this drawing. So now the scale. Again, the scale, we have these arrows to affect the scale, to increase or decrease it, or we can just click in here and type over it. So what if I change the scale to 0.5? Click. You can ignore that warning. So it made the lines tighter together. If I change this to 2, there we go. Okay. So I think in our case, 1 is appropriate. Right? The reason I keep getting this error is because it's trying to because I'm clicking on here in this space right here to get the hatch to go in, and what's happening is it's trying to say it's trying to figure out the hatch pattern for this enormous, infinitely large space, and it's saying, hey, I can't do that. I don't want to hit enter because then that will close the hatch. So that's why it's doing. So you can ignore that error. If you get that error, just ignore it. So we're going to leave the hatch pattern at 1. Hatch transparency, generally speaking, we leave this at 0, but this just affects how dark or light the hatch pattern is. So watch, as I use the slider bar to change this, it's going to get very much fainter. For architectural drawings, this is good to use, right? Because it affects the the appearance of the drawing, of the hatch pattern in the drawing. We're going to leave this at 0 transparency. Okay. Everything else is fine. Let's close this. Okay. And I want you to notice one more thing. Now, because it's an associative feature and an associative pattern here, notice as I move over this, the whole thing is selected. If I go to erase, can I erase a single line? Well, clearly, no, I can't erase a single line. But I also get some added benefit. So if I change the geometry of this, like if I come in here and, let's change this to the visible layer. There we go. If I draw, a line here and I need to change the geometry, guess what? It's not really going to work like I intended it to work. Okay. Right. I'm going to have to trim out that shape to associate the hatch pattern. Right. So if I go back to this, see, it doesn't recognize those lines until I remove, or in this case, trim this away. So now I can go to trim, and I can pick this object and this object and trim it like that. And now what's happening? Well, again, it didn't update it. Okay. So you have to be careful, right? You have to know what kind of object you're dealing with here. And now I can't really fix this very easily other than just to reapply the hatch. Okay, to reapply the hatch. Because you can see I get the grip boxes, and now can I rechange this over here? Yeah, but oh gosh, it's making a mess. And this is one of those cases where it's definitely more work to try to fix this than to do it the right way. Okay, and the right way would be to reapply the hatch, right? But so that you have to be aware of that. But notice what happens now if I use the move command and I move the circle. Because the circle is not interrupting the boundaries of the hatch pattern, the hatch pattern is updating. Even if I move out here, look at that. That's cool. All right. So hatch has some, dare I say, intelligent components to it. As long as we leave it associative. Generally speaking, you want to leave it associative. I think it, if we make it unassociative, then it creates more problems because then every line is an individual line, and it's just a mess. So we don't want to do that. I can't think of anything else that we need to really talk about with the hatch pattern, with the hatch command. So I think we need to move on to the drawing at hand. So I'm going to erase that. I'll zoom in here and we'll bump this up. Now there is some editing of lines that we need to do, and if you refer to the cutoff holder section drawing, you can see that I have some lines that I need to change. So namely, I need to change this line. So watch how I'm going to change this. This line needs to be visible. So I'm just going to pick this and go to visible, and I can assign that line to the visible layer and hit escape to get rid of the grip boxes. Now I can do this together. So I can click on this, click on this, click on this all at once and say, hey, I want all of you to go to the visible layer. And that was pretty fast, right? This line needs to be trimmed out. So I need to trim that, and I'll just trim it between here and here and get rid of that. And this line is going away, so I'll just erase that line. And lo and behold, we are at the point where we're ready to attach or put our hatch pattern inside. So I'm going to change my layer to the section layer, and I'm going to go to hatch, and all I'm going to do is click in here and click in here and click in here. All right, so I clicked inside 1, 2, 3 areas. All of those 3 areas will be associated together. All right, so I'm not creating 3 hatches. I'm creating 1 hatch, but it is separated by these open spaces, right? So that's it. Now, is the angle correct? Yeah, 45 degrees is perfect for this, right? So we'll leave that at 0. Is the scale correct? Yeah, I think the scale is mostly fine. I mean, generally speaking, for engineering drawings, you want to adjust the scale based on the size of the drawing, based on the size of the feature. So if it's a small feature, you want to make the scale smaller for your hatch. If it's a large feature, bigger. This is perfectly fine. So I'm going to click on close the hatch, and then there we go. All right, so that was pretty easy, right? Now we want to create our cutting plane line. All right, so first of all, I have a line up here that I want to use, right? So I'm just going to click on this, the 3 lines right there, and I'm going to change that to my cutting plane layer. All right. Now let's take a second to look at the cutting plane layer. The properties of the cutting plane layer right there. It is a phantom line type, which is correct, and it is a thick line weight, which is also correct. Okay. So remember, it doesn't show you the line weights in the drawing. You have to just make sure that you got them on here set, and we do in the template. If you're using this at home or at work and you want to verify that they're correctly set, the line weights, you can go down to your status bar And if I expand this and I go to line weight right there and I bring that up, you can see it's right there. So this will allow me to toggle line weight. So now I can see thin and thick lines, right? So as a good check, a visual check, this is a good way to do it. And then we can turn that off because we don't want to draw with that because that's annoying. All right, so now how are we going to deal with our cutting plane lines? All right, so in this case, I would suggest turning your dimensions back on because it's going to be helpful to see this, because where you put your arrows, you don't want your arrow going right in the middle of this 54 dimension. All right, so now, whoops, and let's go back to cutting plane layer. So how are we going to draw the arrow? All right, this is a bit tricky. And this is nothing new for AutoCAD. So I've been using AutoCAD since about 1986 or 1987. I was part of the first group at the University of Florida when I was an undergraduate. I was in the first class of the engineering drawing class in mechanical engineering college. The first class to use CAD. All the other classes used or did hand drafting or manual drafting. I was the first class that was using CAD, and we used AutoCAD. And this is the way we used to do it then. This is the way we are doing it now. So AutoCAD hasn't really updated this. I guess they don't feel like it's appropriate. Actually, AutoCAD Mechanical, which is a flavor of AutoCAD, it's slightly different. It has more tools for engineering drawing and engineering. We don't teach that because it has tools that we don't really use, and it's kind of higher level. So there wouldn't really be a cause to use that. More people just use plain AutoCAD. More engineers use plain AutoCAD. But in any event, AutoCAD Mechanical does have tools for doing this. Okay, AutoCAD does not. All right, so how do we fix this? Basically, what we're talking about is creating the arrows. Let me bring this in and show you. We're talking about creating these arrows, which we need on the end of a cutting plane line. All right. Now, the size of the arrows is an important factor. We want to make sure that they're the right size, and there is a standard size for this. You can find this in the MDT department standards, which is in Canvas, right? So you can pull this up on the site, and I will take you to the section view, which is page 11. So I'm going to click on that. There we go, right there and right there. Okay, now let me zoom in a little bit. If I can zoom in, let's go to 100. All right. So you can see that we got some suggestions for the section line, location of the arrow. Now the 0.5 off of the object, that is going to be, and the 0.5 for the tip, this is going to be, these are suggested, right? Because a lot of times the dimensions get in the way of that. So work with this as a first stab and then adjust accordingly based on the dimensions. You might need to move dimensions. You might want to extend this slightly, 0.75 or whatever. But what's key is the size of the arrow, which I'm going to go back one page, and let's see, where does it say here? I'm going to highlight it. The plotted arrow size on the cutting plane line shall be 0.25 inches, 6 millimeters, or 2 times the size of the dimension arrow. So basically, I need to scale this 2 times. Okay, by a factor of 2 from what I'm going to do. Okay, so that's the most important thing here. All right. So let's go back to this, and now let's see, how the heck am I going to do this? Or how the heck are you going to do this, right? So I'm on the cutting plane layer. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Annotate, and I am going to go to my leader, right? and I'm going to create a leader. And what I'm going to do, notice I'm going to put it off of here some distance, and I'm going to draw it down, right? Just how long did I draw it? I don't know. You just draw it until it looks good. And I'm going to click. And then it's going to go into this mode where it's asking me for some text. That's what a leader is. A leader is an arrow pointing to some feature that you attach text to it. So I could, type in some number here or some letter or whatever. I don't want to do that. I'm going to hit escape. And do you want to save your text changes? No. So I just closed the command. So again, let me show you what we did. Leader, pick a point, draw it vertical, pick a point, escape, escape. So this gives us the leader. Now, the leader is an associative feature. That means if I want to delete this line, everything is deleted. If I want to delete the arrow tip, everything is deleted. I need to disassociate it first because the only thing that I care about is the arrow and just this little snippet right here, maybe. Okay. All right, so I'm going to disassociate. And to do that, I need to explode it. So here's the explode command. So I go in and explode, and I'm just going to pick that right there and hit enter. All right, now notice things change slightly. What layer is this on? Let's click on that. That is on the cutting point layer, which is fine. Okay. Whoops, but I notice, look at this. I notice that it says by block. I don't want it to say by block. It should be by layer. All right. And line weight, it should be by layer. And line type, it should be by layer. Okay. So make sure you change that. By layer is what we want. And now, what are we going to do with this? Well, let's fix this first. The arrow is too small by 1/2. So I'm going to go to the scale command, and I'm going to window just the arrow. Let me zoom in here so you can see. All right, so I'm done. I'm hit the enter key. Now it says specify the base point. I'm going to pick the tip as my base point, and I'm going to type in 2 for my scale factor right there. QED, right? Quite easily done. Now I'm ready to move this around. So I'm going to leave the extension. I think that that's fine. But now what I want to do is create a location for me to move my arrow tip. So I'm going to go to the offset command. I'm going to offset 6 millimeters, 6. I'm going to pick this line, and I'm going to offset it up. Now I can tell you that that's going to be too small. So I'm going to offset it again by another factor of 6. Okay. I think that's going to be better. I'll erase the first one. So now what I want to do is I'm going to move this line. I'm going to grab that right there, and I'm going to move it from the arrow tip to right there. I left that there. I don't need that. I'll erase it. And here I can trim. So we'll go to trim. Select the enter key or pick that cutting edge, hit enter, trim it off right there, and then I can erase this line. And there we go. Now, once you have one, don't do the whole thing again. Let's just copy this so we can go to copy and go here. Hit enter. Pick this as my base point and move this over here. Very good. Very good. Okay. So you can adjust this slightly, depending on where your dimensions are. If you need to make this a little bit further out, if you need to make it a little bit higher up. We just don't want to get crazy. We don't want an arrow that is way up here. That's goofy. We don't want an arrow that's way out here. That's also goofy. So, you just use your best judgment. It's not a super big deal. But, you want to use your best judgment on that. And that's it. All right. Now, if we go back to our line weight, we can see, yep, everything looks good. And we're ready to print. We're ready to plot this. Okay. So Let me do this one more time. I'll just run through the whole thing again. Change it to the cutting plane layer. Go to Annotate. Go to Multi-Leader. Pick a start. Draw it straight down. Hit Escape, Escape. That cancels the command. Go to Home, Explode. Pick the object, explode it. Notice that it doesn't look like a cutting plane line because it's not on the correct, well, here, let me window this. It's not on the correct settings. So I want to change this to bilayer. I want to change this to bilayer, and I want to change this to bilayer, right? Then I can scale this. So I go to Scale. Whoops, I don't want that window. I want this window. Hit Enter. I pick that, and I scale it by a factor of 2. Okay. And then I can move it around. So I go to Move, and I pick the whole line, and I want to move it from here to some point that I already have selected, right? So I move it, and then I can trim it off and erase the stuff I don't need. All right, so that's how we create a cutting plane line arrow. That's how we've been doing it for literally decades. And I don't know, maybe we'll be doing it for decades since then, unless you get into AutoCAD Mechanical. All right. Well, that's it. The last thing you need to do here is just go back to, and you should already have this set up. Realize that because you've already done this drawing, everything should be set up, so you won't need to make your scale again or anything. Title block and border should be fine. I would save this as a separate drawing so that you have that. So save as, and call this, cutoff holder section or something, so that you don't write over your original drawing, and then you're good to go. All right. So I hope this helps. If not, please let me know. Send me an email, and we'll talk about it. All right. Thanks. Have a good. Bye.